In the last episode, I talked about the four main parts of Antakaran, which we simply understand as mind. Three of the parts are Buddhi, the dimension which gives you the ability to discriminate, Ahankar, which is your sense of identity, and Chit, which is the reflection of supreme consciousness, and is sort of an underlying capability that enables everything. Just as the electricity supply in a computer, which has nothing to do with the computer's hardware or software, but without it, the computer cannot be operated even if its hardware and software are all in place. The fourth dimension is memory, which we are going to talk about in detail today. Taking the same analogy of computers, memory is the data that your software applications need to run themselves. If I ask you what you think memory is, probably you would say that whatever we can recall from our past experiences is memory. But when we say this, we generally refer to only some specific incidents of our lives, right? But is this all what we have in our memory? Do you really think whatever we can consciously recall, our memory is limited to that? And even if it is, do you consider the fact that we don't just recall incidents from our memory, rather, every single moment, whatever we think or speak, comes from it? Let's understand this with some examples. If I ask you, how do you know your name? You'll say that my parents started calling me this, so I know this as my name. What's the big deal? Perfect. But what I'm asking is, if I ask you this question today, where does the answer come from? You are able to answer this very simple question only because your name is stored somewhere in your memory and you are able to fetch it from there. Let's say if I forget my name, people will say she has lost her memory, right? So when we forget it, we clearly know it was coming from our memory. But when we use it on a daily basis, we don't think much about it being in our memory. Isn't it? It usually happens with us. Many a times, we don't value our abilities or things until we lose them. Now, another question. How do you think your phone can recognize your face, your voice, or simply a text password? It's simple, isn't it? It stores that information when you start using it for the first time, and then it matches this stored information with your voice or face or password every time you try to unlock it. It's pretty logical, right? Otherwise, how would it know you? It's not your friend. But wait, your friend also knows you in the same way your phone does. Your phone recognizes you through the information stored in its memory, and exactly the same way your friend recognizes you because of his memory. It's only because we have it stored that we recognize anything. Otherwise, we won't be able to recognize places, people, or things, no matter how many times we have seen them. Only because of your memory, you recognize a voice you have heard before. You recognize a touch you have felt before. And it's not just about recognizing others. It's the same way you recognize yourself as well. That's why sometimes people who lose their memory because of some accident or illness forget who they are. Because the information is wiped out from their memory. It's like deleting the contact list from your phone. So, memory is just every single data that your senses capture and feed into you, whether you are conscious about it or not. Everything you see, Every sound you hear gets recorded. If you are conscious about what your senses are capturing, then you would recall and recognize it. Otherwise, it will just lie there subconsciously. This is easy to visualize and understand. Wherever we go, we see everything that comes our way. But practically, we notice only a few things consciously. And those we'll be able to recall as our experiences. However, whatever is in the periphery of our vision will be captured by our sense of sight and is stored, whether we like it or not, and whether we pay attention to it or not. Our weird dreams are majorly the result of this subconsciously collected data that we didn't pay attention to while gathering it. That's why we say our dreams can tell us about our thoughts, desires, or fears that we don't acknowledge consciously. Now, this is one aspect of it. When the data collected by our senses becomes our memory, and if we are attentive, we can recall some or all of it. It's just a matter of how conscious we are. But there are so many things our body and our mind do without us being conscious about it. As a child and till recently, I always wondered about where the intelligence in our body comes from. I wondered how my kidneys know which chemicals to filter out from the blood and which ones to keep and in how much quantity. How does my blood know that a certain amount of calcium has to go into my bones and teeth and the rest will remain with it? Shouldn't there be a place where this information is stored in some form? There must be. You and I are not conscious about it, but our bodies seem to be very conscious about it, isn't it? Our bodies are able to access this information and that's why they are able to function. Well, the mental body or the Manomay Kosh, which we talked about earlier in the episode on Panch Kosh, is the place where all this gets stored, making memory an essential part of our mind and the basis of how our bodies function. But this is not it. There are even more fundamental things to ponder upon. How does the child of a human become a human and the child of a cow becomes a cow? It might sound funny to you because it's too basic, and that's the problem with us. We try to know everything which is far away from us and seems complicated, but we tend to ignore something which is just lying there in front. If you think a human child has to have a human shape, there is no other way it can be, and so it's a ridiculous question, then let me tell you that you think like this simply because you have never seen this happening any other way, not because you know how it happens. You have always seen a human producing a human child, except for some cases when kids are not well formed or their certain body parts take the shape of some animals. And even in that case, people either don't think much about it or consider it to be a miracle. Well, a miracle is a miracle only to the one who doesn't know how it works. For others, it's simply a malfunction. And once you think it's a malfunction, you will be compelled to think malfunction of what? The short answer is malfunction of the genetic memory. We all know that we inherit some of the characteristics of our parents because of genes. But if we think deeply, the characteristics come later. First, the genes and their memory decide that we are going to have a human body with a certain shape, isn't it? That's more basic to having inherited the characteristics. If this memory is corrupted, we will develop physical deformities. So the point is, Our body takes a certain shape because of some data stored in the mental bodies of our parents. This is another aspect of the same memory that we are talking about. Now onwards, whenever you think of memory, remember it's not the incidents that you can recall. Rather, it's everything because of which you exist as a human. Your body is able to function as it should, and you are able to interact with the world outside. In other words, it essentially means that your very existence is because of memory. And if we take a closer look, we'll find that the whole universe is full of memory. Every plant and tree knows exactly how its leaves have to look like. Not just their shape, size, and taste, but even the pattern in which the leaves will be placed on the branch. When we talk about mind and memory in a spiritual context, we don't think of memory that elaboratively, because certain things are so common to our sight that we are not able to imagine how deep they are. I hope now onwards that won't be the case for you. Now the question is, if memory is the basis of our existence, then why do some people say that it is an issue on the path of spirituality? What does it mean when people say that we should forget our past and live in the present, not only for spiritual growth, but for living a peaceful life as well, especially in the case of bad memories? If we understand the true meaning of memory and see how vast it is, then we would question how forgetting anything makes sense at all. If we consciously try to forget anything, we can only pretend to forget it for some time and then it will come back. You must have experienced this. And more importantly, we won't like to forget everything, otherwise we won't be able to survive, right? So if memory is the obstacle, how removing it partially will help us? We will solve this puzzle in the next episode. Till then, I would suggest you to analyze all you have heard so far about memory and try to validate it with your own experience and observation. Just imagine if you forget everything that I said today. Would the next episode make sense to you? Probably not, as you will feel disconnected. So memory is important. Think about it before you wish to forget anything. Stay tuned and have a nice time.